when I saw she called out Gintell, that shocked me. It's really not a good thing. It's kind of like you're going after my business itself.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, the podcast that talks about politics and public policy issues that are relevant to you. My name is OKM or Mr. Bota, and
I'm Mr. Money Peter. By the way, before we move on, we want to thank our sponsor for this video. That will be Zeus Coffee. In front of us is 2 cups of chum. And what I have here is a white peach oolong chum latte. And I thought it was really nice because it is a flowery fragrance. Have you tried yours?
Good mix, yes.
Good mix, right? Yeah, so it's this flower taste, I really like it. So those of you who enjoy chum just like myself, when you get coffee and tea, double the pleasure, go and check out Zeus Coffee.
We'll go and dive straight into a hot topic that is a follow-up onto the discussion on the Olympics, right? And it's not about Olympic results per se, but the discussion here involves 2 parties. Both of them are good friends of mine. On the one hand, you have Hannah Yeoh, Youth and Sports Minister. And then on the other hand, you have the most popular podcast host in Malaysia. Not us, not us.
Yeah.
We would like to have that title, but sadly, it's not us. This is none other than Khairi Jamaluddin and also Shahril Hamdan from the Keluar, sekejap
That's
podcast.
Right. How do you feel right now? Because you're caught right in the middle, right? And you know both personally.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So to set the context for the audience, in case you don't know what's happening, what happened was that in the most recent episode of the KS podcast, basically Khairi said that as Youth and Sports Minister, Hannah Yeoh should try to not taichi the situation with regards to how the Olympic Council of Malaysia or the different sports associations actually may or may not work together with the Youth and Sports Minister on sports development programs.
Yep.
Right? So he used the word, there's a lot of these makhluk besar, or these big animals, heavy hitters, so to speak, in the sports world, which includes somebody like the BAM president and also the OCM chairperson, Tan Sri Norza. And Shahril Hamdan also said something about sports minister needing to be a little bit more proactive.
That's right.
If not, the world will happen to you, not you happen to the world. That was sort of like their response and maybe some recommendations, especially from Khairi as the former Youth and Sports Minister.
Yeah.
Hannah's reaction, definitely like to hear your view on this, through her Instagram post, was to, I think, not only disagree with what Khairi said by saying that she actually should not interfere with the running of the Sports Association or OCM, which maybe wasn't necessarily what Khairi was trying to ask her to do, not to ask her to interfere, but maybe to engage. But she also called out the sponsors of that particular episode, Gintell, for saying that they are sponsoring an episode that does not reflect the spirit of Olympics, because of the things that were said. When you saw Hannah's response, what was your immediate reaction?
So at first when I saw some of the screenshot, it was more about her response to the statement. I was a bit like, okay not too bad. Then when I saw she called out Gintell, that shocked me.
Why?
Yeah, because I'm in the same business. Same as KS. We are in the media space. We are media publisher, digital media content, right? Yeah. So to call out a sponsor, it's really not a good thing. Yeah, it's kind of like you're going after my business itself.
Your rice bowl, so to speak.
Yes. And truth is that for Gintell, maybe it's a good news as well, because they get extra mileage. But usually they won't be very happy. I mean, I can just imagine as a business owner, if you call out my sponsor, I won't be very happy. I'll just put it that way. You kind of cross the line a little bit when another level. That kind
sort
of
of like escalate it without maybe needing to escalate it.
Yes, it's kind of like, I'll just put it in this situation, right? It's kind of like this, right? Last time when we were in primary school, let's say I made you angry and then you made me angry, then because of certain things that we do in school, like maybe I didn't throw the rubbish, something like that. And suddenly I just look at you and say, your mother fat.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, whoa, where did it come from?
Okay.
The kind of feeling like we're talking about rubbish.
We don't need to go there.
Yeah, we don't need to go there. That's another level. Yeah, I don't know whether that was a good example and get me in trouble, but that is the general idea of the feeling that I would feel as a business owner.
You're a golfer. There's these out of bound markers. So this one.
That's right. This is a little bit out already.
Okay. So just for the audience context. This is what Hannah put on an Instagram feed. Hey Gintell Malaysia, I find it distasteful of you to sponsor a podcast implying the minister should proactively interfere with Olympics MAS. This is the Olympic Council of Malaysia. And putting photos of Tan Sri Norza and Tunku Imran, labeling Tunku as Big Beast. this is the makhluk besar lah, the heavy hitter, so to speak. Maybe Big B's not so accurate translation lah. Also using the Olympic rings to promote a message that is completely out of line with the Olympic Charter. Your massage chair is now seen as the perfect platform for armchair critics. No pun intended. Would love to hear from you, Gintell, Malaysia. Right, so from my perspective, I don't want to comment on the commercial aspects lah. I actually tweeted out, my support for Hannah in the sense that I said that each sports minister has their own approach. Kyrie has his own approach because many of the sports association heads at that time and even now, when he was youth and sports minister, were very close to UMNO. Some of them were UMNO MPs, UMNO even ministers and whatnot, right? So his ability to engage with them and to try to align interests, so to speak, is actually much easier compared to somebody like Hannah, who is coming in from the outside.
That's right. That's right.
So I tweeted this out publicly. I said that each minister has their own approach.
Yeah,
and
just different approach and all.
correct.
Right?
And I sort of disagreed with Kyrie's recommendation lah. Of course, we can agree to disagree on this, right? Because Kyrie didn't really have that much time to actually say, if let's say I were advising Hannah, knowing her own preferences for this kind of approach, how would I advise Hannah to perhaps engage with some of these association heads in ways that could find win-win situations? I mean, that the podcast is not really a platform for that lah. You just say your piece, have a couple of minutes of description, maybe get some headlines, right? I understand where Kyrie and Shari are coming from because we are also in a similar position as content creators.
That's right.
In our own podcast.
I think just to add on a little bit, Kyrie even within his stories there, he also mentioned this one thing. He said, I constantly call everyone. I even call up PMX regularly.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so it's everyone is everyone is.
I mean, it's a business of
lah.
content creation lah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think the public has to decide whether or not they feel that Kyrie's calling out or even Shariel's calling out is legitimate or not lah. Whether there's substance to their criticism, and I think most of the time there is lah. Right, so but on this particular issue, I think we can agree to disagree. I feel that Hannah's strength is in the way she has a very firm idea and clear picture of the separation of powers, demarcation of powers, what she does as Youth and Sports Minister and what the Sports Association and the Olympic Council of Malaysia does. Of course, KBS or the Youth and Sports Ministers they fund certain programs that will benefit athletes, and maybe that's the way Hannah feels they need to have that kind of cordial relationship. Yeah. So that's the sort of agreeing to disagree part. Where I think I feel that her response in terms of calling out Gintell maybe not so appropriate is this can be seen as a way that the minister is trying to flex her muscles to tell this sponsor and maybe to tell other sponsors as well, hey, if you are going to sponsor this particular podcast, you won't be in my good book, right? And if let's say we go back to the time of Barisan Nasional being dominant in power, right? A lot of the corporates won't even dare to come and sit and engage with the opposition.
Oh yeah,
because you sit with them means you're friend with them. It means that you are anti-government, right? So which meant that very hard for us to get sponsorships or whatever sort of a formal kind of acknowledgement on the part of the private sector. I'm not saying that Hannah is acting like the Barisan Nasional before, but you can see elements of that kind of using the ministerial position to exert certain pressures that may result in certain commercial decisions being made or not made, which obviously would have an impact on the larger kind of discourse that we have out there in different platforms, including ours.
Yeah. So for me, if I were to chip in my opinion on this, definitely much more in terms of communication lah, because that's my side of industry, right? So how I feel about this incident is that, firstly, in terms of their comment and in terms of what Hannah does as a youth and sport minister, I think she's doing a good job personally.
Yes.
I think she should just stay confident in what she has done and acknowledge the fact that she has done well, because there are a lot of people also supported it and said that she did a good job. It's two sides of the story, right?
It's not just the Olympic Games. I think Hannah has done a lot of good things in trying to take care of the welfare of the athletes.
That's right.
Putting in structures to make sure that sports is something that is seen to be much more rudyard friendly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's the part that she's been doing well. And yes, just like any business or any human being in the world, you can't satisfy everyone.
Sure.
But so happened, the KS has a loud voice in terms of their podcast, because they are the top podcaster at all, right? And they call out everyone regularly anyway.
Yep.
I felt like she could have actually just let it be. And in fact, maybe even thank them for saying that the road to gold and this Olympic program itself wasn't
not a
really a
failure.
failure. It was quite good. They even congratulated the winnings and all. And I felt that she could have responded by making a very proud statement. But I don't know why.
Maybe a more statesman-like kind of statement.
Yes. So then the thing about calling out the sponsor part, I do not know what's the intention behind, obviously. But definitely as a business, when you mentioned those things just now, I can't help but to think that, oh yeah, it also will make me a little bit scared about, like, for example, are we okay?
Yeah. Yes,
Luckily,
correct.
we don't go into so many hot topics most of the time. So it does kind of send this signal to the public where, like, hey, as a sponsor, you may not want to sponsor this kind of podcast. It will send out this kind of message, especially to certain group of people, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts about this then?
No, I mean, imagine, let's say we take that argument a little bit further and we throw out some speculative thoughts. In this podcast, I've also drawn attention to some policy gaps with regards to things like PADU, for example, right? So as other people, but sometimes I also supplement this with comments to the media, but I also try to give constructive suggestions on how to improve it, right? What happens if, let's say, I hope this doesn't happen, but if, let's say, Rafizi Ramli comes out in an Instagram statement to say that, oh, this Are We Okay podcast is a podcast that is not fair to PADU and it's not fair to the Ministry of Economy, and anyone who sponsors them, will have to answer to me, something like that.
When the statement is made like that, right, then if, let's say, we're not saying that it happened, right? Now we sound like a military state already.
Right? Of course, I'm pushing it to the limit,
right,
but I mean, people can read it that way, right? To say that, hey, actually this one, something is not quite right there, in terms of the tone and the messaging and all that.
But just to share, today I went out with some friends, and they told me this thing. I don't drink Zeus, but because I watch your podcast every week, right? Now I start to drink Zeus.
So it's also like, psychological kind of, inception.
Because the person said because they drink coffee as well, memang. It's just that because the cup is always there. So eventually they went and buy.
So after a while,
regularly,
then, okay OKM and Mr. Money drink it, so we should give
so
it
we
a
welcome
shot,
sponsor, yeah?
But just a final note on this, right? I think moving away from the sponsors part, it's very clear that KS as a podcast is very different from normal podcasts.
That's right.
Because they are not only there to get eyeballs, they create news.
Correct.
Right? So they have a different role to play in the sense that they are also people who influence the kind of public discourse on different policy issues. Right? So that means that they actually have to be more measured and more sort of like moderate, so to speak, in terms of their approach towards different criticisms. And in fact, I think even in the recent episode, I think what Kyrie said about our performance at the Olympics, I think was quite a considered kind of judgment. And I think they know this in the sense that they know that if, let's say, they go really out of line, maybe some of the sponsors may not want to be associated with the show. But because I think they are seen to be quite considered in their criticisms and in their comments, people actually watch, and also sponsors don't mind being associated, right? So I think this is something that we should take note of.
So in fact, for the last part, I just want to weigh in a little bit on this. What we do right now, to a certain extent, we had the courage to do it because Keluar Sekejap started it. I mean, we've never imagined that people would discuss about public policy and politics and current news in this manner, current issues in this manner, publicly, because it was a very scary thing to do in the past. And when KS started doing that, I thought it's actually good because yes, you may agree or disagree with their opinions. But number one, what they say is substantive. It's not that they're plucking things out of the sky. Number two, they are not very extreme. Like one thing we did mention just now, it's way better than some weird extremists come out and have a podcast that talk about very extreme things.
Imagine if, let's say, UMNO Youth Chief Akmal Saleh with his crazy Facebook and Instagram posts were to have his own show, he would be there saying things that I think many of us would not agree with.
So in fact, KS has been a very great platform that moderates the conversation. Moderate not as in facilitate alone, but also making it into a moderated
middle ground,
right?
Very. I think most very well thought out arguments.
Yes, and I thought there's something good, and it encourages people to think more. So this reminds me of that one thing. Remember, at one point, universities were always talking about this issue because when in university, when you challenge certain status quo and certain norms, like for example, woke culture or something like that, then they don't allow that to being taught in university. They say that it's not good and so on. But the fact of having an education or higher level of thinking is the ability to challenge thought and then accept it or either reject it and make a decision based on it.
Yeah.
That's
Have an intellectual kind of conversation or thought process with regards to the material.
Yeah, and I feel that this kind of podcast and this kind of content encourages it.
Yes.
Yeah, so by doing that, it kind of signals that, hey, we should only have one kind of style.
Or maybe, when we call out certain ministers, we have to be more careful kind of thing. I mean, that's not what we're going to do. Yeah. But I think, regardless of what Hannah said, I think, the genie has been let out of the bottle in the sense that everyone is trying to jump onto the podcast bandwagon that was created by KS. And I think KS will continue to be influential in their own right. Any minister or deputy minister or people in the political scene who don't agree necessarily with what KS has said, what I think they should do is to go onto KS podcast and to engage with Kyrie and Sharif.
Yes.
Right?
Or come to our podcast.
I was going to say that. If let's say you find that maybe that one is too much exposure, you come to our podcast first, and then you test out certain arguments, and then after that, go to their podcast.
Anyway, this side is very much of a different crowd also. Different kind of audience that we engage. And my last thing that I want to say, right? Actually, I think the biggest beneficiary of this is actually Gintell.
Why? Tell me.
Even we are talking about Gintell without needing them to sponsor. So they get the most exposure. In fact, if I'm them, I would right now come up with a whole series of armchair critic.
The branding is armchair critic lah.
Just brand it, right?
Okay.
Just sit down there.
So Gintell, you can come to us as well. We're very happy to test out your products here, to showcase it to a different audience. We have many high net worth individuals and some folks in the older generation who watch our podcast, who I think would definitely benefit from having your products featured here. So very crass.
Come. We are quite open.
All right, be right back after this. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of the Are We OK podcast, and we're gonna go straight into some of the dynamics or happenings and tensions between Barisan Nasional on one hand in the unity government and also some of the component parties in Pakatan Harapan, right? So I'm going to start with this comic issue lah. This is with regards to the court decision to lift the ban on this comic called Yita Yilu or One Belt One Road that was published by a former DAP member and also very popular ceramah speaker called Superman or Hugh Kwan Yao. I'm sure you've heard of him before.
Yep.
Do you know anything about this comic?
I heard that he has a comic that was being banned. Pretty much that's it. Yeah, and then he always talks about it, but I don't really bother looking into what's in that comic lah.
So that comic was talking about how the One Belt One Road project led by President Xi Jinping of China has resulted in many good things, including some in Malaysia and also some of the history behind the relations or good relations between Malaysia and China.
Okay.
Right. So, in fact, a copy of this book was actually given to Xi Jinping when Mahathir was the Prime Minister, and Mahathir visited China for the second installation of the Belt and Road Forum. At that time, Hugh Kwan Yao, who has a PhD in history from University in Hong Kong, was the CEO of the Malaysia-China Business Council.
Right.
But after Sheraton move, with a new administration coming in, somewhere along the way, the Ministry of Home Affairs decided to ban the book. So
for what reason?
I can't remember, but it can't have been a very good reason, right? Because I don't really think that the book, is writes about anything that's particularly sensitive. After the decision by the court to lift the ban, which the Ministry of Home Affairs has to comply with, unless of course the government appeals, two UMNO leaders. One is Puat Zakashi, who's actually the Johor speaker, and then also somebody that we've mentioned in this show before, Akmal Saleh, UMNO Youth Chief, came out to say that they don't agree with the court's decision, and they said the government should actually appeal and ask for the decision to be relooked at. Then certain DAP leaders, including the MP for Seputeh Teresa Kong, said that actually Akmal and Puat Zakashi should respect the court decision. Right, so there's been a lot of back and forth. The latest TikTok video I saw was of Akmal saying that Teresa Kong better respect the will of the majority in Malaysia. I don't know why he said that. He implied that it is because of the majority race in Malaysia, this would be the Malay community, that people like Teresa Kong, meaning the minorities, even have representation in parliament, so to speak. So I thought that this thing has been blown out of proportion, and from what you've seen and what I've described, what do you make out of this?
I don't know where the logic comes in to tie these two things. I still can't brain it. In fact, the thing that I have in mind is, have you ever tried silent treatment in parliament before? Like when someone suggests something so out of the world, right? Everyone just keep quiet and don't respond.
So usually, when I was in parliament and I would speak on certain technical issues and policy-oriented issues, sometimes I would try to see whether I can provoke a reaction from either my own colleagues or people from the other side, whether I was in opposition or when I was in less so in government, because I was a deputy minister at that time. But most of the time, people don't bother to respond because they actually don't understand what I'm talking about.
no, what will happen?
Then I'll just go on lah.
They'll just go on. Then end already, that's all.
Then after that, I'll speak, I'll sit down, and then later on the minister would reply lah. And I mean, what this means is actually the conversation actually becomes much higher quality lah, because you're focusing on the substance rather than the shouting at each other lah.
Actually, my personal thought is that if I'm there in the parliament and they were to suggest that, I would just say, okay, move on. What's there to talk about?
Okay.
I mean, you want to file appeal, go and file appeal lah. What's it going to do with the court? Because the parliament is a place to discuss about things that are more relevant to public policies.
Sure, yeah. But this thing happened outside parliament, right? So it's in the sort of like political milieu. And, just to draw you behind the curtain, definitely when Akmal and Puat Zakashi say something like this, right? And because Superman Hugh Kwan Yeoh, he still has quite a lot of fans in the DAP, including many friends in among the DAP leadership. So I think they felt compelled, number one, to defend him, to defend the book. And number two, maybe what the book represents as well, in the sense that it is not something that is necessarily that sensitive, like what I said. It's not something that attacks, raises up questions of 3R. But because I think the author of the book is Superman, and he's quite controversial among the Malay community, and he's done a lot to whack UMNO in the past, right? So that's why I think these UMNO leaders are trying to take advantage of the situation to come out to basically want to link this issue with Superman, and also maybe to show that they are still sort of like there to go up against certain elements within the DAP.
I feel like it's quite obvious that this whole thing, it's all about trying to gain political mileage
within your own party.
Within their own party with a certain group of people. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to start drawing back out old clips, quoting him saying certain things and then adding things, right? So it's also a matter about the person rather than the issue. Like you say, because he's quite controversial.
Of course, this also raises up the question, which I think is relevant, which is, to what extent does the DAP still want to associate itself with Superman? This is something that maybe others may not be so familiar with, but because, Superman, even within the DAP, sometimes can be controversial in the sense that he sometimes will say things to provoke or get the excitement of the crowd, but he says certain things in Chinese. One example I can remember is that he said, just before the Sarawak state elections this was in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, to campaign for one of our candidates that was a Malay candidate. He basically said that you use a Malay candidate to sort of like insert bad word here the Malay political system, so to speak, right? That's what he said. That's not what I'm saying. That's what he's saying. I'm paraphrasing, right? So that became something that went viral because they translated it into Malay.
Wow.
Right? So that was something that was very controversial. And that's just one of the many controversial things that he said in the past.
Yeah. I recall he has.
I think he did the right thing. Superman did the right thing in terms of resigning from the party and basically taking a stepping back because he knew that he would the things that he says would cause the party a lot of problems, especially if we're in power and now DAP is in power. But then whenever these issues crop up like this One Belt One Road, which I think is not controversial, it doesn't hit on any sensitive nerves as far as I know. Then sometimes the reflection will be back on the party How do you react to these kinds of old history kinds of issues?
Again, I'll say I think best is just ignore.
Okay, just move on and then
move on.
There'll be other issues to talk about.
No news, then nothing at all, right?
Okay.
So I mean, media also just want to gain media mileage, right?
Of course.
So the more you argue, more they're gonna spread it out, right? So what's the point?
Probably also more things for us to talk about But on a related issue, this is not about DAP. This is about Amanah. So Amanah in the Keluar area is now making a very strong public bid to contest in a state seat called Mahkota. It is about a 57-58% Malay majority seat, about 30% non-Malay. And this seat was won by UMNO in the Johor state elections in 2020 in a three-corner fight. So it was UMNO, it was PH in second place, and then PN, I think it was a past candidate in a distant third. So the UMNO Adun in Mahkota passed away recently, and there's going to be a by-election.
Yep.
So now the question is, should UMNO put a candidate or should Amanah be able to put up a candidate? So Amanah's perspective is there's no unity government in Johor. And this is something that you guys may not think of very naturally. But the government in Johor is still a BN government, whereby the EXCO is all BN. There's no Harapan or no PH EXCO in there. Although they have an agreement in terms of constituency allocation, it's like a friendly opposition kind of scenario. Right? So this draws us into the question, what is the relationship like between BN and also PH in a state that is where there's no unity government? Right. So from your perspective, what do you make of this kind of tussle between UMNO on the one hand and Amanah on the other?
I think that it is all about, again, power. Like it's kind of like going in for the market share, right?
Do you want to maintain your market share?
Is the business perspective, like I think UMNO's position is very simple. This is the only state that I can still be very, very proud of, that we can still retain. And they had really a hard time over the past 2 years.
There's Johor and then Melaka, they still have the chief minister there.
So this one is like their, my pride and joy now. On the other hand, Amanah is an expanding. They want more market share in that sense. So, can I just step in a little bit and have at least a foothold there? But again, for UMNO, it will be a question, right? When you have this one, we'll go for more.
Tell you what will happen. My educated guess, which I think will be quite accurate, Amanah will concede the seat and let UMNO fight that seat. And I think one of the things that the Amanah President Mat Sabu will use and say is that in the Pulai parliamentary constituency and also one of the state seats that was held by the late Salahuddin Ayub, UMNO made way to allow for Amanah to contest there without any BN candidate. Right? So if let's say Amanah were to reciprocate, then definitely it's a no-brainer. This seat will be given to UMNO to contest. And I think UMNO stands a pretty good chance of retaining this seat, especially if let's say they get the support of the majority of the non-Malay voters that went to PH the last time. And it will be a good showing for UMNO to be able to say that, look, with the help of PH, I am able to maintain this seat with a strong majority. Which I think they will. But this points to actually a larger question, which you alluded to. Amanah trying to fight for this seat is actually symptomatic of a larger challenge that Amanah is facing. Meaning, if you keep to the status quo rule, right? Meaning, Amanah will only contest in the seats that they won in the last general election and the state elections. They will be left with maybe, 12, 13 parliamentary seats and about the same number of state seats, maybe a bit more, especially in Selangor. And whatever aspirations that they want to contest in places like Kelantan, even Terengganu, to go up against PAS will be gone because all those seats will be taken up by UMNO. Right? So they would be even in a weaker position. And I think this would be one of the existential questions that a component party like Amanah faces. Meaning they can get easily wiped off the political map, especially if, let's say, in the next general election, PAS continues to make even bigger strides, right? Which may well happen. And I think this is an interesting space to watch, not because of this particular by-election, but because of the larger trends that it points to with regards to possible BN and also PH cooperation in the next general election. Right. So you have a situation where you have this, UMNO versus Amanah situation in a state seat in Johor, which I think will be resolved. And then you have another situation whereby you have certain UMNO leaders that continue to agitate against PH, especially with regards to DAP. So that actually shows the tension. Some people in UMNO wants to continue to work with the unity government or within the unity government framework. Others within UMNO are agitating because they are not happy with the decision or the direction that the president of UMNO is taking. Right? So this tension will continue. Whether or not, of course now UMNO president has the upper hand, but whether or not there will be tensions that can spill out into the larger public involving more UMNO top leaders, I think it's an interesting space to watch, especially closer to the next general election.
I think that is actually a very big problem within the PH party itself, because the joining force with UMNO thing was not something that was expected. So it was designed that Amanah was supposed to represent the UMNO within the party.
Or maybe more PAS. They would go and take
for
up
that
a lot of
demographic
UMNO seats.
in that sense.
Yes.
It's for that demographic, right? And so suddenly now it's it's kind of like a replication of a thing, right? To a certain extent. So I would say that I can see why the struggle is happening. And but for the sake of a unity government, I think it's a wise choice to give to UMNO .
And they probably stand a better chance of winning.
It's a much better overall big political move in my opinion.
A Big Ten approach. But just to keep a pin on this, I think it'll be interesting for us to think about this question. As the unity government continues to find its feet, and as this framework continues to maybe solidify, right? The question is this by cooperating, BN more or less actually UMNO together with PH. Is PH becoming more like UMNO, or is UMNO being influenced more by PH?
That's
okay. We put a pin on that.
That's a very good one.
There's a separate kind of discussion that we will have maybe later down the road. But maybe just end this session on this part We talked a lot about the internal dynamics. One area that needs to have a bit of attention over the next few days is the by-election in Nenggiri. This is a state seat where a by-election was triggered because the former Bersatu Adun, who's also the Gua Musang MP, decided to support the unity government in exchange for constituency allocation, and the speaker in the Kelantan Dun basically vacated the seat, and because of this anti-hopping law in the state constitution, and the Bersatu Adun lost his eligibility to be in Adun, and then the election commission, upon getting the notification from the speaker, called for a by-election. Right, so this seat is in the parliamentary seat of Gua Musang. Has quite a sizable minority of Orang Asli. I'll go into the figures after the election results are announced. But just to give you a bit of a sort of like a summary, what is at stake? What is at stake are a few things. Firstly, whether or not Tengku Razali continues to hold influence or not. Because he was the MP there for a long time, like 40 years or something like that, right? And he's been named as the elections director. That is a recognition on the part of UMNO to say that he is still influential and he's still powerful. And, I think for him, it would be a big sort of like a slap in the face if he cannot go out there to win back this seat. So that's one political implication. The other political implication is, to what extent is this also a referendum on the leadership of Zahid Hamidi as UMNO president, because this is UMNO seat, right? So the stakes are actually quite high for these two individuals. even though it's just one state seat, it won't affect the balance of power in the Kelantan Dun, which is still very much dominated by PAS lah. Right, and then probably the third impact I would say is the impact on Bersatu, because Bersatu's presence in Kelantan and also in a place like Gua Musang is so weak that it couldn't find any suitable candidates. They needed a situation whereby a PAS member had to resign from PAS, join Bersatu, to get fielded as a Bersatu candidate under the PAS flag, which is what they contest under in Kelantan, right? So I think for Bersatu, this is also sort of like a referendum of sorts.
Right.
Yeah.
So the implication here is less of affecting the current structure, but rather it's going to show a huge sign of where the wind is blowing in that sense, right?
And I did some initial numbers. This is a close seat, about 800 votes majority that was won by Bersatu in the state elections.
800.
Yeah, and Gua Musang is actually a 50-50 parliamentary seat. So a lot will depend on, for example, how the Orang Asli will vote. Most of them would, I think, vote for the unity government because of the strength of some of the federal agencies. At the sort of like the larger Malay sort of like a voter base, it also depends on how many come back from outstation to vote. And see how the sort of like mood swings in terms of these kinds of dynamics.
Okay.
So yeah, something for us to look out for. The results will be out by the time this podcast is aired, so we'll have more to discuss at the next podcast.
We actually have another sponsor for this particular video,
The company that's responsible for the renovation of this place?
That's right. For those of you see this beautiful fluted panel at the back of us, right? Yeah, this is actually an acoustic panel. So what's really good about it is that it absorbs voice. You know how, Ken Ming, when you go to certain cafes, it is very noisy.
Correct.
Because the reverb, the echo, like that, right? Yeah. If they were to install this kind of fluted panel, number one, it's going to look good, but number two, it's going to reduce all those echo. So it's much more comfortable to sit down there and chat with your friends.
I second that 100% because I've been in too many cafes where it's too noisy. I can't have a decent conversation. I will probably not go back to those places again.
That's right. Same here. Yeah.
So with Sleek, we'll have a situation where there will be good sound absorb and good conversation places.
Yep.
And maybe even good places for karaoke.
That's right. And also beautiful as well, I have to say.
Beautiful, very chill kind of place.
That's right. Yeah. So go and check out a Sleek Acoustic Panel. It's a product by Shimling, the company. Yeah, go and check them out. We'll put the link in the description below.
Okay, welcome back to the final segment of the Are We OK podcast for this episode. And we're going to go to a piece of news that maybe you guys are not so aware of, which is the appointment of Dato' Maimunah Sharif as the new KL mayor. So I'm sure most of you don't know who the previous mayor was. Frankly speaking, I can't remember his name as well because I don't know what he did, if he did anything at all. But the reason why I wanted to highlight this was because Dato' Maimunah is somebody who is much better known, not just in Malaysia but internationally.
Yeah.
She was formerly the mayor of one of the local councils in Penang, I think on the island side, and she after that was appointed as the head of the UN Habitat, which is one of the UN agencies that does different kinds of work in the sustainability kind of space, cities and other areas. She finished her term recently, and after she came back, there was this opening. There was, I think, the ending of the tenure of the former mayor of KL, and now she's been appointed as mayor, and she's the first, I think, high-profile mayor that we've had in quite a while. And I think my own interest in seeing what she will do is whether or not she will take on or bring in some of the ideas that she was exposed to and perhaps even champion as the head of the UN Habitat to bring into part and parcel of the KL ecosystem. If let's say I were to ask you, what are some of the things that you would like the new mayor to focus on with regards to KL city, what would some of these priorities be?
ROL. River of Life.
River of Life. Yeah.
Since we just talked about it, right? And then I was quite invested because I read up for it, because of the episode and everything all. I was just thinking about it when I heard the news that she was going to be appointed as the KL mayor. I looked through her CV, right? I mean, not a real CV lah, but credentials kan. And wow, very, very, very
Accomplished.
very accomplished. Seems like someone who's very well versed with town planning.
Yes.
And we got Penang to show for during that period. It was that whole making Penang heritage and nice
reviving
and stuff.
Georgetown.
Yeah, reviving Georgetown. So I feel like, hey, that could be something that she can do for KL lah. Yeah, especially that whole stretch, at the River of Life area.
River of Life, the
Yeah.
old Chinatown.
That's right. If they can just make the connection between the Taman Tugu all the way to Chinatown, right? That stretch is very clear. I feel like I can run, right?
That would be quite iconic. already.
That one also quite powered.
Yeah. So I think definitely for me that would be one way in which she can show her leadership in area that was highlighted in the Auditor General's report, which received a lot of public attention. So probably the right person, I think, to take up that kind of role of facilitator and leader lah. I think the other area where I think would be interesting to see what she can do is with regards to setting up better structures on the accountability of DBKL, right? Because DBKL, as you know, is a very different creature from the other local councils in Malaysia, whereby they don't have these local councillors. There are some representatives who are sort of like political appointees that sit on, some council or some board, but it is not the same as your local councillors in PJ or in Subang or in Selangor or in Penang that have a real sort of like power to influence policies, influence the implementation of different policies in the local councils. So if let's say she can come out with a structure that increases the accountability, that will also be good.
Great.
And then maybe the third thing would be the role that she plays in trying to firm out or plan out this KL draft plan, which has been in the news for different reasons, mostly for the wrong reasons, because it has been delayed many times. There's a lot of these kinds of zoning issues, land development issues that cause a lot of residents a lot of headaches and challenges and problems. So having her experience, hopefully with the support of the KL FT minister, who was the former health minister, hopefully would be a good sort of like signal for KL that better things should be coming to them. Maybe before we end, just on some leadership transition issues, since we talk about leadership transition in DBKL, there are also some leadership transitions happening in some countries near us.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So starting with the Thai situation, where the Prime Minister Shreta, the former Prime Minister rather, was, relieved of his position because Constitutional Court in Thailand found that he had not, gone through the proper process of appointing one of his cabinet ministers.
Yep.
Right. And then now we have a new Prime Minister in Thailand. Right, who is
the daughter of the former prime minister. Yeah, that was like wow, interesting. Yeah,
Back to the Future kind of thing.
I mean, the thing is that in the previous election there were already rumors saying that
maybe she
maybe she will, right? And it was shocking. For me, it was very shocking.
To me, I wasn't that shocked because I've been monitoring this situation quite a bit. And I don't know what the policy direction will be for the new administration under Thaksin's daughter, Petatong, I think that's her name. From Malaysia's perspective, I would say that this is, although we do not want to sort of like, quote unquote, take advantage of these kinds of situations of leadership transition in our neighboring countries, but it is an opportunity to show that the policy ecosystem in Malaysia is much more stable. Because I speak to many foreign investors that come through the region, including Malaysia, these would be people who want to invest in equities, fixed income, and even some people who are looking at the FDI situation, right? I've been hearing their sort of like skepticism about the Thailand policy ecosystem since last year. Because they found that, firstly, the kind of policy direction on the part of the then Prime Minister Shreta was a little bit unstable. He was also fighting the central bank on a lot of policy issues with regards to interest rates, and also wanting to create these e-wallets to throw in lots of money to give to the Thai people, especially at the lower income level, which may not be financially sustainable. And there was also this kind of sword hanging over his head that he could be relieved of his position by the Constitutional Court. Plus, you had the situation recently of the Move Forward Party being banned, right? Which again, I think creates a lot of unhappiness among the younger generation, right? So in that context, we wish the new Prime Minister in Thailand well. But again, I think it shows foreign investors coming into Southeast Asia that Malaysia is a stable place.
That's right.
That we need to be able to, promote our policy innovation and policy stability with regards to attracting foreign direct investment.
So here's where I think I want to draw this part, right, to the attention of a recent forum that I attended is Endeavour's forum called the Future Forum 2.0. So there were a lot of different investors, people who came, and even Tan Sri Nazir Razak was actually there giving a talk as well, right? And one thing that was said by one foreign, I'm not sure if I can actually quote the person, but yeah, it's actually Angmo lah. Yeah, in a big company that's stationed in Malaysia, revealed some information. It's quite interesting. He said this one thing to Adlin, which was the Endeavour's managing director. Malaysians always think that Malaysia sucks, but the truth is, many foreign countries are now looking at Malaysia and say, "Hey, actually, you're quite good." We see a lot of great talent. We see a lot of chances to invest and everything. But Malaysians are the ones doubting Malaysians ourselves. So maybe the situation is not as bad as what we think. There's a great opportunity for us ahead.
Yeah, and just to relate another story, which is I was interviewed recently by The Economist for a show called Money Talks. And this was with regards to the flow of investment coming in from China, Chinese companies investing in Malaysia, the challenges as well as the opportunities, right? So definitely there are many investors, including from China, that want to come to Malaysia for different reasons, right? Language, logistics, connectivity, cost of doing business, and so on and so forth. I think, again, it's about strategic alignment and thinking. It's about trying to make the full use of this opportunity so that we can attract the best investments coming from China.
That's right.
And we talked about this last week about the EV ecosystem when we talk about Tesla, right? It's a great chance for us to start or continue rather the engagement with different Chinese EV players, right? And it's not just about getting them here, in a hurry, but planning out what sort of supply chain that we want to build. And what sort of domestic capabilities that we have in order to be able to allow some of our locals to benefit from this kind of FDI inflow. So definitely, I think it's good for us to put our government to the task in terms of making them accountable. But like you said, I think we are in a good place. We have the kind of political stability and policy stability for the next 3 years. So let's make the best out of it, and we definitely wish the government well, especially those in cabinet that have jurisdiction and responsibility over different economic areas, whether it's Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Digital. All these are important ministries to facilitate the investment ecosystem in Malaysia. All right, any final thoughts that you want to share?
Nothing much. Yeah, everything is good. Just a last question. Will you be running at the event they promoted last week?
Oh, this Larian Keluarga Malaysia.
Yeah, Larian Keluarga Malaysia.
Yes,
will you be running there?
So I've signed up already. I have the t-shirt and I've signed up for the 10 km run. Definitely will be running. I'm not sure what race KJ will be running, either the 10 km or the 21 km, but this is part and parcel of my preparation for the 21 kilometer half marathon that I'll be running for KL Standard Chartered. And for that, I'll be raising funds for Teach for Malaysia.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'll share more information on my own social media feed. So sad to say, Shahril Hamdan won't be running in the Larian Keluarga Malaysia because he told me he's
you enjoy
overseas.
calling him out,
Yes. Every time I want to call him out, either on social media or on our show. But I hope to be able to get him to run 5 kilometers with me and Kyrie before the end of the year. So Shahril, you're on the hook. The clock is ticking. Right? See you next week. Bye-bye.
See you next week.